The Amazon is a paradise, but can be dangerous. From avoiding poisonous plants to understanding the delicate balance of nature, I've learned to follow the rules, the ones written on paper, and the ones whispered in rustling leaves when no one else is around. I arrived just after the rains, when the air was thick with moisture and the sky hung low like a green ceiling stitched from vines and fog. The boat that ferried me down the muddy river left in silence, the engine coughing its last echo as it vanished beyond the bend. I stood alone on the warped wooden dock, watching the jungle breathe. The trees were ancient giants, dripping with moss and secrets. Macaws screeched overhead, their colors brilliant against the heavy sky, and somewhere in the distance, something large moved, not quickly, but with a purpose. I've been a wildlife photographer for 14 years. I've been to Siberia, Madagascar, Patagonia, but nothing matches the living heartbeat of the Amazon. It doesn't just surround you, it consumes you. Even in stillness, there's movement. Even in silence, something listens. My name is Elias Mercer, and this is the story I never want to tell. Because some rules shouldn't be broken, and some forests should be left alone. I came to the Alto Purus region with permits in hand, camera gear wrapped in waterproof shells, and a satellite phone with just enough juice to call for help if the canopy didn't eat the signal first. A local guide, named Enrique, met me at the edge of the research base, a modest cluster of thatched structures on stilts above the soft earth. He didn't speak much English, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He'd seen things out here, things that wouldn't be captured on any lens. "Stay close," he said in halting English, "and don't forget the rules." I nodded, thinking he meant the usual. Don't touch unknown plants. Don't disturb nests. Respect the tribes. Leave no trace. But there was something more in his voice, a warning that curled like fog in the back of my mind. The first rule came the next morning, over bitter coffee and the squawk of cicadas. Enrique unrolled a brittle parchment from his satchel. It looked more like bark than paper. The ink was faded, the language a hybrid of Spanish and indigenous dialects. But he translated each line for me. 1. Do not enter the forest without invitation. 2. Do not photograph the same animal more than once. 3. If you hear your name whispered from the canopy, do not respond. For when the trees fall silent, hide. 5. Never, ever cross the river after dusk. I laughed, thinking it was part of some ceremonial protocol, a performative rite to set the tone, superstition, myth. But Enrique didn't laugh. Photographers come, some never leave, he said, tapping the second rule. They break this one. Jungle remembers. I humored him with a nod and gathered my gear. My mission was to document the vanishing biodiversity, especially the harpy eagle and the elusive jaguar. My sponsor, an eco-conservation group, needed raw, visceral proof of what was at stake. I was here to capture the living Amazon before it vanished, before humanity swallowed it in concrete and smoke. The first few days went by in a blur of green and sweat. Every step was a negotiation with roots and mud. Spiders the size of dinner plates clung to leaves above my head. Frogs in dazzling colors croaked warnings I didn't understand. I moved carefully, respectfully, part curiosity, part fear. The forest allowed me in. I could feel it. The harpy eagle was the first gift. It perched on a high branch, regal and silent, its talons the size of my fists. I snapped a dozen shots from a safe distance, adjusting for light and movement. The bird watched me, unblinking, then soared away with a grace that turned the air electric. That night, I printed one photo and pinned it above my cot. Enrique frowned when he saw it. "One picture," he said sharply, holding up a single finger. "One. You remember rule." I assured him it was the only one I kept. The rest I deleted. I didn't sleep well. The jungle never truly goes quiet, but around midnight, the sounds changed. The chorus of crickets faded, replaced by a rhythmic clicking, like bones tapping together. It came from the trees beyond camp. Slow, deliberate, too precise for any natural animal. I sat up in the dark, listening. Enrique's bedroll was empty. I found him just before dawn, crouched at the edge of camp, eyes locked on the tree line. "You hear?" he whispered. I nodded. "They're watching now," he said. "Forrest knows your face." I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't want to know. The next morning, I ventured deeper with Enrique guiding the way. We crossed streams where piranhas flickered beneath the surface like glass shards. We skirted ant columns that tore through the earth in disciplined fury. I got shots of capybaras, howler monkeys, and a lone sloth that blinked slowly as I adjusted my lens. Every photo felt like a small miracle. But that night, something changed. I developed the day's shots using my portable field printer. Most were fine, sharp, vivid. But one photo stood out. A frame I didn't remember taking. It was the harpy eagle again. But this time, it wasn't on a branch. It was perched outside my tent flap. At night, feathers slicked with rain, eyes hollow and dark. The composition was perfect. Too perfect. I stared at the image, my stomach twisting. Enrique entered my tent and saw the photo. "You take second picture," he said, his voice cold. "You break rule." I swore I didn't. I had no memory of it. No shutter sound. No light adjustment. But the image was there. Ink on paper. Proof. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my camera zipped tight, lens cap on, shutter locked. Still, I heard it, the whisper. My name, spoken low and wet from the canopy above. "Elias." I froze. The whisper came again, closer now. "Elias." I wanted to run. Instead, I held my breath, remembering the rule. Do not respond. The air thickened. The insects stopped. The jungle inhaled. Then came the sound, a soft thump outside the tent. I opened the flap a fraction. Nothing. No, not nothing. The harpy eagle stood a few feet away, unmoving, soaked in moonlight. But its wings weren't folded. They were outstretched, like arms. And its head was human. I stumbled back, knocking over my gear, clawing for my flashlight. When the beam hit the clearing, it was empty. The bird, or whatever it was, had vanished. Not a single feather left behind. Enrique didn't speak the next day. He packed his belongings in silence, eyes never meeting mine. "Forrest not forgive," he said, finally. "Now it follows you." I begged him not to leave. I wasn't ready. I had work to finish. But he shook his head and handed me a small pouch of dried leaves. "When the river sings, drink this. Maybe it help, maybe not." Then he was gone. I spent the day alone, drifting upriver in a small canoe. I had coordinates for a jaguar nesting site. The light was perfect, the air stifling. I followed the winding channel deeper until the trees leaned close, shadowing the sky. It felt like entering a cathedral built by time itself. That's when I saw it, the jaguar, reclining on a thick branch over the water. A rare moment of calm. Its eyes met mine, unafraid. I raised my camera. Click. Then, before I could lower the lens, click. Another photo. I hadn't pressed the button. The screen flickered. Battery low. Storage full. I reviewed the shots. 2 images. The second one showed the jaguar not on a branch, but crouched behind me, in the canoe. Mouth open. Teeth bared. I dropped the camera into the water. The river went silent. Then it sang. Not music. Not birds. Voices. Whispers in a dozen tongues. Chanting from below the surface, like the water was dreaming out loud. I fumbled for the pouch Enrique gave me and drank the bitter contents. The world swam, colors shifting like oil on water. The river stopped moving. The trees leaned in, and from the shadows came the shapes. Long-limbed, bark-skinned, eyes like camera lenses. Watching, measuring. One of them stepped forward and held out a dripping photograph. It was me, mouth open, camera in hand, standing over the eagle's body. I had never taken that photo. I screamed. The jungle swallowed the sound. And somewhere, far off in the canopy, the eagle screamed back. The photograph haunted me. It wasn't just the image itself. Me, wild-eyed, looming over the broken body of the harpy eagle. It was the impossible fact that I'd never taken it. I couldn't have. And yet, there it was, crisp, soaked, and handed to me by something that had no right to exist. The forest had changed. Or maybe I had. The river didn't flow the same way after I drank from Enrique's pouch. The trees leaned differently. The sunlight came through the canopy in narrow columns, almost reluctant, and the animal sounds carried strange tones, half familiar, half sentient. The Amazon wasn't just alive, it was aware of me, and perhaps disappointed. I paddled back to camp in a stupor, heart pounding, camera gone, mind unraveling. But when I arrived, I found something worse than silence. The camp was abandoned. Enrique's hammock was empty, his gear scattered. The little wooden idol he kept nailed to the post was broken in half. One eye gouged out, the other blackened by fire. The storage shed was wide open, the emergency radio gone. Even the footprints had been washed away, as if the jungle had consumed every trace of his existence. I stood alone in the clearing, trying to steady my breath. Then I heard it, not a whisper this time, but a giggle. Childlike, echoing from the trees. I spun around, but saw nothing. Another laugh, closer now. I grabbed my backup camera, a lighter handheld I kept in my pack, and aimed blindly. But as I lifted the lens, I remembered the rule. Do not photograph the same animal twice. But this wasn't an animal, was it? I lowered the camera. That's when I saw her. A girl. Maybe 8 or 9 years old, brown skin dusted with ash, tangled black hair clinging to her cheeks. She wore no shoes. Her eyes, there was something wrong with her eyes. Not in color, but in depth. They went on forever, like staring into a well where light couldn't reach. She pointed to the trees and then ran. I should have stayed, should have waited for daylight, for logic. But the forest has a way of convincing you that movement is the only safety. I followed her. She darted through the underbrush with unnatural grace, never brushing a single leaf. My boots sank into mud and dead things. I ducked branches and tripped over roots. And still, I kept her in sight, until she stopped, suddenly, in a narrow clearing where the light had no warmth. The trees here were wrong, twisted, blackened, carved with strange spirals that pulsed ever so slightly, as if something beneath the bark was breathing. And in the center of the clearing was a wooden platform, raised slightly above the ground and covered in offerings, feathers, bones, human teeth, arranged in perfect circles. The girl stood beside it and spoke. "Take photo," she whispered. I shook my head. She stepped closer, her voice harder now. "Take photo." I backed away. My fingers trembled around the grip of my camera. Then she screamed, a high, piercing wail that shattered the illusion of her humanity. Her mouth opened wider than it should, and from her throat came not sound, but a buzzing, like swarms of bees, like 100,000 wings fluttering inside her lungs. I turned and ran. Branches tore my skin. Roots grabbed my ankles. The buzzing followed, louder and louder, until it felt like it lived inside my skull. I didn't stop until I burst through the trees into a wide basin filled with orange light. The sun was setting, and I had no idea where I was. But I wasn't alone. Across the basin stood a figure, tall, draped in foliage and mud, face hidden beneath a veil of stitched leaves. In one hand, it held a walking stick carved with jaguar teeth. In the other, it dragged a string of rattling bones. It didn't move, just stared. I didn't blink. Neither did it. Then, slowly, it turned and walked into the trees. I should have gone the other way. But curiosity, it's what brought me here in the first place. It's what always kills the fool. I followed. The jungle was different here. Older, somehow. The flora unfamiliar, even to someone with my experience. The air buzzed with a static hum, like the atmosphere before a storm. The path the figure took led to a hollow tree that stretched wider than a cottage, split open at the base to reveal a narrow passage descending underground. He was waiting at the edge. "Photographer," he said. His voice was rough, like bark tearing from wood. I froze. "How do you?" He raised a hand. "You walk in the green shadow, but you walk blind." I stepped closer. I didn't mean to break the rules. I didn't take that second photo. You did not. But the forest did. I stared at him, confused. He lowered his veil. His face was not human. Not anymore. It was a blend of man and something else. Lichen grew from his cheeks. His eyes were completely white. A thick vein pulsed where his lips should have been. "You came to capture," he growled. "But the forest remembers. It sees what you take. It sees who you take." I stumbled back. "What do you mean, who?" He gestured behind me. I turned slowly. The girl stood at the edge of the clearing again. But this time she wasn't alone. There were dozens of them. Children. Adults. Some barely human. Some with twisted limbs. Some with camera lenses instead of eyes. Some holding photographs that bled at the edges. All watching. All silent. "She was the last," the figure said. "You took her with your lens. The shutter is a trap. A prison of light. The forest mourns its stolen children." No, I stammered. I only photograph animals." He shook his head. "Not always. Not only. Sometimes the forest wears a face to see if you still respect it. Most fail. Most shoot." I thought of the harpy eagle, of the jaguar, of the photograph I didn't take. Those weren't animals, were they? He didn't answer. The forest did. A groan rippled through the trees. The roots began to twist, curling like fingers. The wind shrieked between the branches. "Return what was taken," he said. I can't. I don't know how." He stepped aside and gestured to the hollow tree. "Then walk the path of memory. See what was taken. See who still watches." I hesitated, but my legs moved on their own. The tunnel was tight and damp. The air grew colder as I descended, and the walls glistened with fungus that pulsed dimly. I emerged into a chamber filled with photographs. Hundreds, maybe thousands. pinned to vines and bark. Each one showed a moment. A creature, a human, a pair of eyes looking directly at the camera. In the center of the room was a mirror. When I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw them, all of them, every face I'd ever captured, real or imagined, staring back. Some smiled, others wept, some bled from the mouth. One looked like my mother, and behind them all, the forest, towering, watching, judging. I screamed. The mirror cracked. The chamber shook. I stumbled backward, blinded by sudden light. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in my tent, alone. The camera was back in its case. The photographs were gone, but carved in the canvas wall, in long clawed strokes, were the rules, the real ones. 1. Do not take. Only witness. 2. Do not frame. Let pass. 3. Do not show others what was meant only for you. For the forest gives, the forest takes. 5. Leave before the moon bleeds. I didn't sleep. The camera felt heavier now. Outside, the jungle clicked and shifted, alive with unseen motion. I wasn't sure if I'd ever been awake at all. But when I stepped outside at dawn, Enrique was there. Only it wasn't him. It wore his shape, and it smiled. It wore Enrique's face like a mask stretched too tight. Same rough stubble, same weathered eyes, same calm stance, but something in the expression was wrong. Too still, too precise, like a taxidermy copy of the man I once trusted. I took a slow step back, unsure if my legs would hold. The thing smiled wider, as if amused by my hesitation. You look tired, Elias, it said in Enrique's voice, perfectly mimicked, down to the cadence. Long night. I didn't answer. It took a step forward, boots not quite touching the ground. The space beneath its feet warped slightly, like heat rising off pavement. A shimmer, subtle and stomach-churning. I made coffee. That's when I noticed a mug in its hand. The same chipped blue enamel one Enrique used. Steam rose from it. The scent was wrong, bitter, cloying, tinged with something metallic. I try not to breathe it in. What do you want? I asked. I'm your guide, it said. Aren't I supposed to lead you? It tilted its head, mimicking a gesture I'd seen Enrique use when spotting a rare animal. Or maybe I already did. It set the mug down and turned, walking toward the trees. Every part of me screamed to run the opposite direction. But something deeper, some primal instinct sharpened by weeks in this place, whispered that turning my back was the worst mistake I could make. I grabbed my gear, slung it over my shoulder, and followed at a cautious distance. The jungle beyond the camp had changed again. The path that led me down wasn't marked on my GPS. The terrain shifted beneath my boots, one moment mossy, the next brittle and dry. Trees curved unnaturally, some growing in spirals, others leaning so far over the path that they formed a tunnel. A constant hum buzzed at the edge of hearing, like thousands of wings fluttering just beyond reach. I checked my compass. It spun slowly, no longer pointing anywhere. My breath grew shorter as the heat pressed down like a weight. Sweat soaked my clothes. The thing ahead, Enrique, or whatever wore his skin, walked effortlessly, never brushing against a single vine. I didn't ask questions. I just followed. Eventually, we reached a clearing I hadn't seen before. It was eerily symmetrical, a perfect circle of flattened earth ringed by tall red trees. In the center stood a totem made of bones and twisted branches, decorated with old camera parts, shattered lenses, broken film reels, and tangled wires. At its base sat an old backpack, weather-beaten and half buried in dirt. I knew that pack. It belonged to Marcus Hall, another photographer who went missing in the Amazon 6 years ago. I remembered his story vividly. He vanished during a solo trip into the Peruvian side of the jungle. His last transmission had been a blurry photograph of something massive moving through the canopy. No one ever found him. Until now. I moved toward the pack, but Enrique blocked me with one arm. "Only those invited may touch the offerings," he said. I took a step back, heart thudding. What happened to him? "Same as you," the thing said. "He came to take. He came to frame beauty within limits. The forest has no patience for cages, even made of glass." The totem behind him breathed, not in metaphor, but literally. The wood pulsed as if drawing breath. A low creaking sound rolled through the clearing, like trees whispering warnings. Marcus didn't follow the rules, the thing said. He took a photo of something forbidden, something that exists outside the sequence of time. The moment was captured, yes, but now it captures in return. I remembered the second photo of the eagle, the second shot of the jaguar. Photos I hadn't taken, or thought I hadn't. It wasn't just superstition, I murmured. The rules, their protection. Rules or promises, the thing replied. Between watcher and watched. Break them, and the roles switch. I stared at the totem. Something inside it moved. "I want to leave," I said, voice cracking. The thing smiled again, not kindly. "You want to escape. But escape is for prey. You're being measured. The forest decides whether you go, or whether you remain. Some is echo, some is whisper, some—" He glanced back at the totem. "As relic. Then why guide me?" I asked. "Because," it said, "there's one rule you still don't know." Before I could speak, it reached out and touched my chest, gently, like marking a boundary. The jungle shattered. In an instant, I was standing somewhere else entirely. No trees, no sky, just an endless, murky space filled with floating images, hundreds of photographs suspended midair. Some were mine, some were not. I saw Marcus screaming into his own camera lens. I saw the girl with the eyes that swallowed light. I saw myself. Only my mouth was sewn shut, and my fingers were branches. Then the voice returned, not from the creature, but from everywhere. "Do not look directly into what sees you." I fell backward. The vision vanished. I landed hard on the forest floor. Daylight had returned, but barely. The sky was bruised with thick gray clouds, and the trees loomed heavier than before. I was alone again, but my gear was intact, and someone, or something, had drawn a map into the dirt beside me. A crude path leading to a point marked only by a red X. Against all sense, I followed it. Navigating the wild had never been this difficult. The forest no longer obeyed logic. I walked for what felt like hours, but the sun never moved. The temperature shifted wildly, humid one moment, freezing the next. At one point, I crossed the same clearing 3 times from different directions, each time finding different bones scattered in the grass. I was being tested, and I wasn't passing. Then, finally, I saw the X, carved into the bark of a wide ceiba tree that twisted up in the clouds. Its roots were the size of cars, curling around a stone platform overgrown with moss. Atop the platform lay a weathered journal, bound in leather and sealed with twine. I untied it and opened the cover. Inside were notes, sketches, photographs, all from Marcus Hall. He had documented everything. His descent into paranoia, the whispered voices, the warnings. Each photo was captioned with times and coordinates, but many were crossed out in red ink, marked "Do Not View." Others had been torn out entirely, but one page stood out, a final entry. "It's not about the animals. It never was. The forest isn't a place. It's a memory, a god that dreams itself real. And every photo we take is a theft, a piece cut from its flesh. That's why it hunts us. That's why it mimics us. I see it now. I am it now. I'm sorry." The bottom of the page had one final rule, scribbled hastily. "Never photograph the same place twice." A chill rolled down my spine. I looked at my camera. My fingers hovered over the playback. I reviewed the shots I'd taken today. My breath caught. There, tucked between photos of vines and monkeys and fungus-covered rocks, was the exact same shot of this tree. The ceiba, same angle, same lighting, same moss formation. Only I'd never taken it before. And in the new photo, there was someone in the frame, standing behind me. I turned around. Nothing. No, not nothing. The shadow of a man stretched from behind the tree, even though no light touched it. And then I heard the camera shutter click. But my hands weren't on it. Something else was. The lens turned to face me. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms. Roots writhed beneath my boots. My chest ached with every breath. I didn't know where I was going anymore. Just away from the thing that had taken my shape, my gear, and now my eyes. Eventually, I burst into a glade lit by strange blue mushrooms. The air smelled of rotting orchids. In the center was a pool of still water, and across the surface shimmered every face I'd photographed. They looked at me. They opened their mouths, and they screamed. The sound came from inside my head. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. The water rippled. Something massive stirred beneath. And then, a hand broke the surface. Human. Familiar. It held my camera. And from the lens, a whisper. "Smile." The shutter clicked once more. The shutter echoed like a gunshot in my skull. I stumbled backward from the pool, ears ringing, heart a frantic drumbeat. The hand that had emerged, pale, veined, unmistakably mine, had now slipped beneath the surface, taking the camera with it. Only the ripples remained, widening into perfect concentric circles that reflected the blue glow of the fungus around me. I was shaking so hard I barely noticed the cuts on my arms or the mud soaking my knees. I wanted to scream, to vomit, to run. But the forest was watching, and it wouldn't let me leave. I stood on unsteady legs and backed away from the water. Every part of my body told me to flee, but the path behind me was gone, swallowed by creeping vines and thick shadows. The only way left was forward. I walked. Branches snapped in the distance. Somewhere above, a sloth groaned low and guttural, a sound I'd never heard from a creature known for its docility. Birds flew in chaotic bursts, as if startled by something not meant to be seen. And then came the howler monkeys, not calling but mimicking. Elias. One of them rasped. My name, spat in my own cadence, repeated again and again, scattered through the trees like a mockery. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't the natural world anymore. This was a twisted echo of it. The jungle wasn't just watching. It was becoming me. Or I was becoming part of it. After an eternity of staggering forward, I stumbled into another clearing. And this one, at first, was beautiful. Bright orange butterflies danced in a shaft of sunbeams, filtering through a broken part of the canopy. A troop of capuchin monkeys chattered near a massive fig tree, picking at fruit and grooming each other. The scent of damp earth was rich and grounding. For a moment, Just a moment. I could pretend it was normal. Then I saw it. A jaguar, poised just beyond the tree line, golden eyes locked on the monkeys. Its body was still, muscles coiled, tail twitching. Predator. I raised my backup camera, the only one I had left, almost without thinking. My fingers hovered over the shutter. And then I remembered. Do not photograph the same animal more than once. My mind raced. Had I already captured this one? Was it the same jaguar from before? The lighting was different, the pose unfamiliar, but its eyes, God help me, they looked familiar. The jaguar blinked slowly, and then, impossibly, it smiled. Not a baring of teeth. A smile. The monkeys didn't move. None of them. I realized they weren't monkeys at all. Not anymore. Their eyes were all wide open, unblinking. Their hands frozen mid-motion. One was mid-scratch behind its ear. Another had a berry perpetually poised near its mouth. They were mannequins. Tableaus. Photographs come alive. Or to stillness. I lowered the camera, heart hammering in my chest. The jaguar began to walk toward me. Slow, graceful, purposeful. Its paw prints made no sound. And as it moved closer, its form shimmered. The spots on its coat shifted, swirling like ink dropped into water. One moment, it was a jaguar. The next, a man. Then a bird. Then a woman with vines for hair. Then a flash of Marcus Hall's screaming face. It was all of them. A collage of everything I had ever taken. Everything I had stolen. I backed away until I hit something solid. A tree. But it pulsed beneath my hand, and when I looked, it wasn't bark. It was a wall of photographs. Thousands of them. All mine. Every photo I'd ever taken, from my first trip to the Serengeti, to the forests of Romania, to that puffin in Iceland. They covered the trunks, the roots, even the ground beneath me. And every subject in those photos was watching me now. The jaguar stopped at the edge of the clearing. It tilted its head, the way I often did when trying to frame a shot. It stepped aside. Behind it was a doorway, not of wood or stone, but of light and shadow. A rectangular frame, like the aperture of a camera, hovering between two roots. I stepped forward and entered. On the other side was a corridor, not underground, not above, just between. The walls were green, mossy, lined with chittering insects that formed words in fleeting glimpses. I couldn't read them all, but one phrase repeated often. Return the stolen light. I walked, and the passage grew narrower, then wider. It breathed with me. My heartbeat echoed down the tunnel. Only it was too loud, too delayed. Like something else was mimicking my rhythm. I began to walk faster. The echo quickened. I stopped. It stopped a second later. Something was following me in perfect imitation, but always a breath behind. When I emerged, I was no longer in the jungle I knew. It looked similar, trees, vines, creatures, but everything was off. The colors were oversaturated. The bird calls were reversed, like someone had played a recording backwards. I could smell honey and rot at the same time. And ahead of me, in the middle of a clearing, stood a woman with skin like cracked stone and hair like dripping moss. Her eyes were closed. Around her feet lay dozens of animals, perfectly still. A capybara, a toucan, a snake with rainbow scales, all dead or sleeping. She opened her eyes and looked at me. You took them, she said. Her voice was the forest. I didn't mean to, I whispered. But you did. I fell to my knees. My mind was a chasm now, heavy with things I hadn't remembered until that moment. The snapping of branches I hadn't heard. The shutter clicks I hadn't felt. The way I always wanted just one more angle, one more shot. She knelt in front of me and placed something cold into my hand. It was my camera, only it wasn't mine. It was older, covered in soil and dry blood. The brand didn't exist anymore. But when I pressed the shutter, it clicked, and from the lens came a voice. Mine. You stole moments. Now live in one. The world slowed. Time dragged like sap from a broken trunk. The birds froze mid-flight. The wind stilled. I could feel my heartbeats stretch longer and longer apart, until they became indistinct thuds, like distant drums in fog. Then everything stopped. I was standing in a forest made entirely of photographs. Leaves that crinkled like film negatives. Flowers that pulsed with light instead of scent. Every tree bore the face of someone I photographed. I turned in a slow circle, and there, at the very center, was me, a photo nailed to a tree. Eyes wide, mouth open, a caption scrawled beneath it in crooked letters. Witness. A sound broke the silence. The woman was gone. In her place, a massive bird perched on a twisted branch, a harpy eagle, or something that wore its skin. It stared at me with human eyes. I knew what it wanted. Redemption. Reversal. Surrender. I lifted the camera and pointed it at myself. But the shutter wouldn't click. No, I whispered. And then, behind me, something spoke. You never had the lens. The forest always did. I turned, and there, walking out of the shadow, was me. Not a reflection, not a hallucination. A perfect replica, smiling, holding the real camera. I stared at him, at myself, as he raised the lens. No, I said again, weaker now. You are the wildlife, he said. The shutter clicked. The light engulfed me, and I fell into the frame. The frame is cold. Time doesn't move here. I don't breathe in this place, not because I can't, but because there's no need, no wind, no hunger, no decay, just endless stillness, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Except the thunder never comes. I'm a photograph now, not metaphorically, literally, trapped in a perfect moment, my body still, my eyes open, staring, framed by light, every detail frozen in pristine clarity, the sweat on my brow, the panic in my expression, the dread creeping into my posture. The jungle watches me, even now, but it doesn't just watch. It remembers. Outside this suspended reality, the rainforest continues to breathe. Life moves through it, wild, pulsing, dangerous, and divine. The trees stretch higher. The rivers shift their courses. Creatures emerge and vanish before the shutter can ever find them. And somewhere, back in the waking world, someone else will arrive. Some new photographer, some thrill seeker, some well-meaning explorer with a backpack full of lenses and a heart full of reverence, who will tread too deeply, listen too little, and try to take. But the jungle doesn't belong to us, and it never has. Before all of this, I thought conservation was about preservation, about protecting fragile things from a destructive world. I thought my camera was a tool to help, to showcase beauty, to inspire awareness. I told myself I was honoring nature by framing it, freezing it, capturing it. But I see now, you cannot capture what does not want to be owned. You cannot trap divinity in pixels. The forest I entered was never just a tangle of leaves and rivers. It was a god dreaming itself awake, a sentient entity that wore a mask of biodiversity. And beneath that mask lived something far older, deeper, and more watchful than we could imagine. And it has rules. Rules I broke. The forest tried to warn me. With whispered names. with faces I recognized in places they shouldn't be, with copies of photographs I never took, showing moments that hadn't happened. Yet, I dismissed them as tricks of exhaustion, hallucinations brought on by heat and stress. But they were memories, not mine. It's because every time I lifted that lens, I stole a piece of its soul. Every shutter click was a scar, every photo a wound. And now, I am payment. But I am not alone. There are others here, thousands, maybe more, trapped like me in frames hung on trees made of breath and bark. Faces caught mid-smile, animals twisted into grotesque poses, shadows of people who once looked too long. Some scream behind their glass prisons. Others just watch, like I do now, forever observers in a museum of stolen moments. I saw Marcus Hall again. He was crouched in the hollow of a tree, camera in hand, eyes wide and cloudy. I try to speak to him, but the frame doesn't allow sound, only sight. He turned his head slowly, recognizing me. The sorrow in his expression said everything. He tried to warn me, and Enrique, or what became of him, walks the forest still, not as man, but as guide, a vessel of memory, part human, part jungle, cursed to speak the rules to those who will never truly listen. There's still time, time for others, time for you, because even now, beyond the veil of vines and rivers, the real world keeps turning. Satellites orbit, cities grow, forests burn, and people like I once was pack their gear and chase the wild, thinking they can tell its story. But the story is already told, written in root and bone, and the forest, it does not forgive. You may think this is a myth, a cautionary tale, a hallucination spun from fever and fear. But if you ever step into that sacred green cathedral, if you ever feel the jungle watching, listen closely. The rules are not for your safety. They are for its. Respect them. Obey them. Because the Amazon is not just paradise. It is judgment, and it remembers every shutter click. Somewhere far away, in a gallery no one built, a photograph hangs from vine. It's me, standing beside a harpy eagle, eyes hollow, one hand reaching toward the camera. My expression is hard to read. Not quite fear, not quite peace. But if you stare long enough, if you really look, you might swear the photo moves. Just slightly, just enough. And behind me, deep in the blur of the jungle, something is smiling. Forever. The end.